Welcome back to the Revolutionary Communist Podcast. My name is Joel Bergman. I am here this week with Marcus Katrianuk of the Executive Committee of the Revolutionary Communist Party, and we are going to discuss Mark Carney doing the bidding of the bosses. Yes, he's only been Prime Minister for a couple of months now, and the speed at which he has embarked on one of the most, if not the most, regressive program in the history of the country is really shocking, actually. And we're just going to go over a few of the main things here that Mark Carney has done. I think actually most people haven't clued in yet. I think the effects of his policies haven't been felt yet. I think most people haven't been paying attention, to be honest. But I believe there will be whiplash from this. And we are here as communists to expose this capitalist government. We were totally against voting for Mark Carney. We were totally against this idea that we had to vote for him. And now it is being entirely confirmed why. Yes, I think the first thing we wanted to start with was this law that they rammed through the parliament, Bill C-5. I guess the first comment I want to make is they within a very short period of time, they had tabled it, it rammed it through the parliament, it was passed through the Senate, and then they stopped the parliament for the summer. So they quickly rammed this through. This is the bill that's supposed to eliminate trade barriers and fast-tracked development projects, right? Yes, this I think all the parties pretty much agreed with this bill. I think there was slight opposition on some parts of it. But it was the conservatives and the liberals uniting together, which is a bit weird if you knew the dynamic before this parliament, was the conservatives wouldn't vote with the liberals on anything for a long time. But they united together to pass this bill, which I think tells you a lot about the bill. But why don't we get into the details of what is this bill? What was this bill? What is this? Marcus, Marcus has written on this. He's researched it a bit, so maybe you can tell us a bit about the bill.
Basically, Mark Carney has been promising to build stuff bigger, build stuff quicker. This bill is a key component of that. Basically, what it does is it gives the federal cabinet the power to completely override a whole long number of different acts and regulations, particularly environmental regulations, and to fast track any economic project that they deem to be in the national interest. They don't define the national interest. They want it to be very vague so they can basically do whatever they want. But when you actually go through and you look at the list of acts that they're now able to navigate around, what they've essentially done is they've abolished environmental regulations at a federal level, in essence. They can now get around the Fisheries Act, the Migratory Birds Convention Act, the Canadian Environmental Protection Act, the Impact Assessment Act. So this is not a symbolic bill. It actually gives the federal government very wide-reaching executive powers.
Right. So this is connected. I guess the reason why this is being done is, Mark Carney is not letting a good crisis go to waste. This trade war with the U.S. has posed an existential crisis for Canadian capitalism, and they're trying to diversify trade partners, and they're trying to. I think it's something that the Canadian capitalist class has wanted for a while. They've been a little upset at the number of regulations, the things in the way of them trying to build, mining projects, pipelines. Canada is a country with massive resources, right? Obviously, the bourgeoisie wants to get at that. But another angle is not everyone's happy with this bill. I mentioned pretty much all the parties voted for it. Even the NDP, I believe, voted in favor of it. But not everyone's happy about it. I think almost unanimously, all Indigenous groups, the chiefs, the band, different band, even band councils were pretty much opposed to it. Actually, quite pissed off that they weren't consulted, et cetera, et cetera. So I don't know. Do you want to speak to that?
I'll actually just say, just on the response from the Conservatives, the only opposition that I saw in Parliament was some Conservatives who thought it didn't go far enough,
Yeah.
and thought the only problem with it is that it didn't completely scrap all regulations completely. There was a conservative MP from Edmonton who was saying that.
Yeah.
But I mean, that's just a side point. The main thing is obviously environmental groups have been angry about it. And yeah, there's been mass anger from different indigenous groups towards this bill. The Assembly of First Nations have denounced it. The chiefs or the Leadership Council, the Chiefs of Ontario have denounced it. The Council of BC Indian Chiefs, Treaties 6, 7, and 8 from Alberta. So really wide array. I mean, we're talking about these organizations that represent the big majority of the Indigenous population in Canada actually have denounced this bill. And yeah, I mean, there's really simmering anger. The feeling amongst Indigenous groups is that this bill is going to be used to, trample Indigenous rights and to basically violate any land rights. I think they have good reason to think that. As a matter of fact, the Bill C-5 originally wanted to include the Indian Act in the list of laws that it was able to just navigate around, right?
Yeah.
But they had to amend that out like last minute. That just would have been too unpopular. But I think that detail shows the direction that the federal government wants to go in, right?
Yeah. So obviously, this for the last period, Indigenous groups basically blockading, standing in the way, actually opposing. Basically, let's put it this way: capitalist encroachment on their land has been a thorn in the side of the Canadian ruling class. And Trudeau kind of tried to play nicer a little bit. He talked about reconciliation, and he was appointing Indigenous people, like the governor, Mary Simon, as Indigenous. He's trying to do that sort of tokenistic identity politics, liberal game to appear more progressive. But clearly, the bourgeoisie were not happy with this. They couldn't get a lot of the projects built. They couldn't get them built. They couldn't, this United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People that the Canadian government sort of recognized ensures that Indigenous people can essentially veto things. Now, of course, the Canadian government, they accepted that, except for this. They said, no, they can't veto things. So they're always kind of playing with this. They want to appease Indigenous groups to make sure that they don't get too angry and they don't block development projects. I mean, people could think of Wet'suwet'en in British Columbia, where they were blocking the building of a pipeline through their land. That was a big scandal. It delayed the project. They don't want this. There's Lambeck Lane, who essentially, I think in the end, they actually defeated the project on their land. That was a big movement. So they don't want these types of movements. They don't want this type of opposition. But at the end of the day, it is an existential crisis for the system. So they got to kind of ram through these types of projects. So this bill is a massive omnibus bill that included many things in it. It's being criticized also because there was almost no questions. There was no reviews of it. It was just sort of rammed through, and then the parliament was shut down for the summer. So I guess the question is, why? Like, why did Mark Carney, why did he do this? He's pissing off Indigenous people. He's pissing off environmentalists. A lot of trade unions were actually raising concerns that this might allow them to override trade union rights in some circumstances. So I guess connected to the doing the boss's bidding, that's the theme of the latest issue of Communist Revolution, our newspaper. Yeah, it's actually not shocking if you look at what the main institutions of the capitalist class have been demanding. So I'm just going to quote Goldie Hyder, who's the president of the Business Council of Canada, which is an organization that represents the top CEOs from the top 170 major corporations in the country, the big banks, the mines, et cetera, the oil companies. About this bill, he spoke to the Senate in favor of the bill, which he described as an important step to strengthening Canada's economic capacity. And this is what he said. He said, "We're losing out to our competitors, of which many of them are in countries with weaker environmental standards and less respect for the rule of law." Now, he didn't say this, but the insinuation is that Canada needs to eliminate laws and regulations that are in the way of private profit. So, yeah, this is doing the boss's biddings. Obviously, this has actually been something that the Business Council of Canada, the Canadian Chamber of Commerce, they've been demanding this type of stuff for a long time, and now they're not letting this crisis go to waste. They're going to ram through these development projects, and you could expect, like, they will fast track things with little to no regard for the environment or Indigenous rights. Or I will add this for labor rights, for wages, for benefits. They'll try to get that as low as possible, so they can get maximum profit off of it. So yeah, I don't know if you have anything to say about that, but I just want to say that's the most clear representative of doing the bidding of the bosses.
Yeah, and I mean, I think, even we have to place it in a wider context because
Yeah.
this bill and really the actions of the Carney government in general cannot be understood outside of the context of a capitalist crisis and specifically the crisis of Canadian capitalism. In every regard, I mean, Canadian capitalism is lagging behind on the world stage. Productivity has been collapsing, capital investment has been collapsing, and has been fleeing to the more productive and more profitable American market. And you also have this brewing trade war. Donald Trump, who's looming over Canada, and
Yeah.
constantly threatening it. So in this context, the capitalists need to do everything within their power to maintain profits and to get rid of any barrier in their way to extracting more profits. And I think that's a very important note because when you look at Bill C-5, well, the clearest attacks are the attacks on the indigenous population and the attacks on the environment. But it's not going to stop there. This is really just a sign of things to come. It's going to begin with these things, and then it's going to be the next step is going to be workers' rights and labor rights and all other sorts of rights after that.
Yeah, so speaking of, this is entirely correct. Speaking of the wider context, um, I think we'll talk about it a bit later, but the question of increased military spending. You have this basically rearmament, like militaristic war drive that all the NATO countries, all of the Western imperialist nations like Canada, are all engaging in, promising to increase their military spending to 5%. And the place that Canada as a nation, let's just put this, it's one of the biggest countries geographically in the world, has a vast quantity of natural resources, and is a relatively small population, and is not going to be able to play a huge role in terms of providing troops and stuff like that necessarily, because it's got a relatively small population. But in NATO can play a very big role. Actually, Mark Carney said when he went to the NATO conference, everyone was asking him how they can get access to Canadian critical minerals, which are used to produce military equipment. So really, you have to look at it in the broad context. It's a crisis of capitalism. Canada's being outcompeted on the world level. There's this trade war with the U.S., and then there's this militaristic war drive in which I think Mark Carney's pivoting to basically make Canada a quarry for the military industrial complex, which has existed in the US for a long time. I'd say Canada doesn't really have a military industrial complex, but they want to build one in all the Western countries, and Canada will supply the resources to allow that to take place. So I think that you have to look at this bill and the rapidity that it was passed and everything they're doing in this global context of what's happening. So we can talk a bit more about the militarism, the military spending, because I think that's a separate question a bit later. But I did want to go into another thing that they've proposed, but they haven't passed yet. It's this act they're calling the Strong Borders Act, Bill C-2. It's tabled, and I imagine they'll revisit it in the fall when Parliament's back, and they'll probably try to pass it as quick as possible. But yeah, this is another thing that I think is a very reactionary piece of legislation that Carney is trying to ram through. But I don't know. Do you want to speak to that?
Yeah, I mean, the bill is, to be honest, a little shocking. What it does is it, in essence, abolishes due process in the realm of immigration. The what is it? The the governor council's office, now, or the governor general's office,
Yeah.
now has the power to end any immigration document if they consider it to be in the national interest to do so.
Yeah.
So that includes residency, PR, immigration applications, visas, anything they now have the power to just cancel any of these documents without any due process at all. And I think Immigration Canada Services now has the right to, if this bill passes, to suspend or cancel any immigration document. Requesting someone that come into the country. So again, this really fits into this wider string of attacks by the Liberals against immigration over the last few
Yeah.
years. You saw this under the Liberal government, where Trudeau tried to blame the housing crisis on immigrants, specifically, international students,
Yeah.
and implemented a cap on student visas. So this is part of a wider trend for the liberal parties too.
Yeah, exactly. So there was actually an article in the CBC that I read that the title of it was Anti-Refugee and Anti-Immigrant Law Giving Canada Unchecked Powers Like the US. So I think we also can't look at this law in isolation, like anything. Are they doing this now? Well, the timing is actually quite something. Everybody knows it's been highly publicized. The really quite shocking raids by ICE agents in the U.S., the mass deportations, putting people on planes, sending them back, or sometimes sending them not even to where they're from, just getting them out of the United States. And at the same time, Mark Carney is introducing a very reactionary, anti-immigrant, anti-refugee bill, which is one of Trump. We have to admit, we have to make this clear. Mark Carney was elected. Why was he elected? Well, he's elected on this whole elbows up against Trump, unite against Trump, resist Trump, people saying that, which was, let's just put it clear, very obvious now, that was sanctimonious bullshit. He was not ever going to resist Trump. This is not about resisting Trump. He's doing a deal with Trump, and he's giving in on, so far, seems like pretty much everything. And this Borders Act is one of the main demands of Trump. It's very anti-immigrant, anti-refugee. You remember the Trudeau days saying, Canada's a beacon of hope in the world and you're welcome here. Sanctimonious liberal nonsense. Was never serious, really, with Trudeau. And now it's very clear that they didn't mean any of that. And they're going back on this.
And if I can add too,
Yeah.
actually, this is something that all Canadian politicians have bent to Trump on ever since Trump got back into
Yep.
power. He won the last election. He demanded Canada needs to strengthen its borders. He blamed he raised this scaremongering around the flow of fentanyl over the
Yeah.
border, and all of the premiers actually committed new border guards immediately.
Even Wab Kinew and even David Eby, even NDP premiers were doing.
Yeah, Wab Kinew converted conservation officers into border guards, actually,
Yeah.
and then Trudeau he also pledged a whole bunch of spending for the border.
Yeah.
So this is something that they've all bent on.
Yeah, so this might be shocking to a lot of people. Why? Why does everyone capitulate to Trump? Why is even the NDP premiers capitulating to Trump? I thought people were going to stand up to him. And it's like, look, we are communists. We are Marxists. We analyze things. We got to look at the economics behind it, right? Behind the actions of these big politicians. This is capitalism. Capitalism is in crisis. There's a trade war with America. America is Canada's biggest trading partner. And this is... they don't have a lot of bargaining chips, right? So they're going to have to give in on a lot of these things, and that's why that's happening. Oh, the only really real way you could resist Trump would be on a socialist basis, I would say. That would be the only real way to resist Trump, and you wouldn't have to implement these bills. This reactionary bill, you could have workers' democracy, workers' power, all the wealth being used collectively to the betterment of the entire population, indigenous people, with protection of the environment. But under capitalism, they really got no choice in the matter. So that's why we're seeing this. So, in connection to the sort of anti-immigrant, the Strong Borders Act is mainly this anti-immigrant, anti-refugee kind of thrust to it. It's been denounced by immigrant groups, by refugee groups all over the country. It's kind of sneaked in another aspect to it, which is an aspect of repression and spying and things like this. Do you want to speak to that?
Yeah, it's actually crazy what they've snuck into this. First of all, the any public police officer under this bill would have the power to request, or not request, but to demand your digital information from private companies. So this would include your full name, your address. All of this would now be in the hands of police officers, individual police officers without a warrant.
Yeah.
So there's that. It would give Canada Post the power to open up and read any piece of mail that they deem to be suspicious. And again, there's no
What
concrete
does that mean?
parameters for
What
that.
is
Yeah,
that?
it's whatever. They can read it for any reason they want,
Yeah.
right? And there's also, and this connects back to the militarism, but it also wants to reconsider the purpose of the Coast Guard and essentially use the Coast Guard to, gather security information, essentially give the Coast Guard police-like powers. And this fits into kind of like this wider trend towards militarism because, the Carney government has been openly talking about using the Coast Guard and repurposing it for security purposes. It's now they're moving it to the portfolio of the defense minister. There's been talks of arming the Coast Guard.
Yeah.
The military has officially denied that there's any plans to do this yet, but still, I mean, it's not like they're not considering it.
Yeah. So yeah, repression. This, yeah, that gives them the authority to uh, obtain your personal information from internet service providers, banks, doctors, therapists. I don't know how they're going to do that. That breaks the confidentiality, I think, probably. Whatever, they'll find a way. Landlords. So yeah, this has been denounced by 300 civil liberty groups in Canada, saying this is like Big Brother spying, basically. Interesting though, I haven't seen right wingers who are all about personal freedom denounce it. I think they're in favor of it because they know this is going to be used. They say this is, because it enables us to better track down sex offenders and drug dealers and stuff like this. If you believe that, I don't really believe that. That's what they're doing with this. This is, and I think we need to look at it in the general context of the capitalist crisis. Some of these bills, and we'll talk some really, really, really regressive attacks on the working class that they're preparing, that they haven't really announced yet, but they're preparing it. This is going to create a mass opposition. There'll be mass movements, there'll be strikes, there'll be people looking to fight against this government. So what this does is it gives them powers to target the left, to target activists. They've already been targeting indigenous activists, pro-Palestine activists. Clearly, they've been firing people. They've been whatever, taking them to court for whatever, for something that's nothing. So we've seen this across the Western world. They prescribed this group Palestine Action in the UK. So yeah, these types of laws are going to be used against us, against anyone trying to resist this reactionary capitalist program from the government. So that's really the purpose of this stuff. So it's actually not surprising. It all kind of comes together. But yeah, that's Bill. So we addressed Bill C-5, the ability, giving the government the ability to ignore environmental regulations and all sorts of regulations and basically indigenous rights. And now we have Bill C-2, which is this capitulation to Trump's Strong Borders Act, giving them the ability to repress dissent internally. But I think one of the big ones that's also come out is, and I mentioned it briefly already, is this kind of militarism, this militaristic war drive. Now, Carney was elected. For a long time, Canada has kind of been one of the lame duck countries of NATO. A long time ago, I think it was in 2006, they set this target of 2% of your GDP you should be spending on military spending. They call it defense spending. Not really defense. It's weirdly called defense. It's used for foreign wars mostly. And Canada's never reached it. I think around Harper, and under Harper, they were around 1% conservative prime minister. And then it raised under Trudeau to 1.37%. Trump was very mad about that. Canada wasn't reaching the target. Trudeau promised to get to 2% by 2032. Carney got elected on the promise to get to 2% by 2030. Then he got elected and he turned around and he said he was going to get to 2% this year. So he's going to fast track it. And then he went to this NATO meeting and he came back saying, I'm going to raise to 5% of GDP. This represents the biggest increase in military spending since World War II. Melanie Joly said, "We're a wartime cabinet." A wartime cabinet, and we're not in a war. And there is no plausible chance of Canada getting attacked anytime soon. So yeah, this is a kind of one of the things Carney's doing. Now, a lot of people I've seen people say, "Oh, but defense, we got to defend. It's a scary world, right?" But what is this really about? I guess. Do you want to say a few words? This military spending?
Yeah, I mean, really, what you have is internationally this glowing drive towards militarization,
Yeah.
right? And this arms race that's taking place everywhere. But I think we have to be very clear about what the consequences of it are going to be. Is it's going to mean cuts. It's going to mean cuts to social services. It's going to mean cuts to the standard of living of the working class in this country. I mean, we're talking about centupling. That's not a word that I say of very often. Centupling the military budget
Yeah.
from 1 to 5 in a few years.
Yeah.
That's going to be tens of billions of dollars at a time when the government is already announcing that it's going to be making cuts. I don't know if you want to talk about this a bit more later, but yeah, I mean
it all flows from it. So
exactly, like the finance minister, Minister Champagne, has directed all departments of the government to find what 7.5% in spending by the end of the year.
yeah.
That's a substantial amount of money. So how are they going to make those savings while also pledging tens of billions of dollars more to military spending? The only way they're going to be able to do that is by slashing social
Yeah.
services.
Yeah, that's essentially it. The and on the theme of doing the bidding of the bosses. So I already quoted Goldie Hyder from the Business Council of Canada. Well, last fall, I think it was last November, they were pressuring the government to increase military spending to 3% of GDP, not 2%. They said, okay, it's good that you're going to do 2, but you should do 3. And uh, why? So, and what they think needs to happen. So they said, let me just find it here. Yeah, last November they published a report, Security and Prosperity, the Economic Case for a Defense Industrial Base Strategy. So they wanted to hit the 2% target by 2030, not 2032 as Trudeau had promised, and they were pushing to go to 3%. And how are they going to afford it? It's connected to what you said. So the Canadian government was spending at the time about $30 billion on military. I believe to get up to, Carney said this actually a couple weeks ago, to get up to the 5%, that would have to go up to 150 billion. So there's a big hole there. Where are they going to get that extra 120 billion from? This is what the Business Council of Canada says, that the Government of Canada should immediately commit to a comprehensive review of its current programming, like the one initiated by the Chrétien government in 1995. Now, if you are too young to remember that, I do remember that. This was the biggest cuts to federal government spending, healthcare, and education in the history of the country, as far as I'm aware. Massive cuts across the board by the Chrétien government in 1995. He said, this program review would ensure that the lion's shares of new investments in Canada's defense are offset by a decrease in government spending elsewhere. So they were demanding it. The bosses were demanding it last year. And Carney, actually, if you want to understand why Carney's doing what he's doing, you just need to look, usually a few months or maybe a year ago, what the big CEOs were asking. And he's doing all of it to a T. And they're congratulating him to do it. And we really should not be surprised. Big banker, finance guy, he's their guy, you know? So yes, they're basically saying that with this said review, they can save $90 billion, which will not be enough, actually, because it won't reach the 5% target. So yeah, this is really what this military spending represents. It's this militarization of the NATO countries, and somebody is going to have to pay for it. So
Actually, if I can add
yeah,
too,
go
I have
ahead.
this quote from Carney where he basically says this, tactfully. He said, in regards to his plans to increase military spending, uh, all of this will require ambition, collaboration, and yes, on occasion, sacrifice. And at the news conference, he was asked explicitly, will this mean cuts? And it got a little slippery, but he still basically said yes. He said, there's no true security without economic strength. And this is true for defense and security. It's true for our social programs as well. We can't redistribute what we don't have. I mean, so basically, the point is that they need to strengthen the government economically. They need to find
Yeah.
more savings. And if social services have to go down the drain because of that, then that's necessary.
Yeah, so then this is unsurprising that the finance minister, Dominic Champagne, has, the government sent a letter to all of the different departments saying they wanted the 7.5%. They wanted them to come up with a plan this summer that they can discuss in the fall for basically a 7% cut across the board. Um, the Canadian Centre for Policy Alternatives, which is a think tank in Canada, basically said they crunched the numbers on it. You can read the report online. It's pretty good. It says this is going to lead to the worst cuts in modern history. Now, obviously, it's in the interest of Carney and the government to kind of play this game like you were showing, where they try to obfuscate the truth. Are you going to cut? Well, male things, they don't want to say it directly, but it's very clear. Like, this is being denounced by the PSAC, the Public Servants Alliance of Canada. Some of the main unions are going like, oh shit. This is, and actually they've cited the fact that over the last 10 years, employment in the public service has gone up by about 100,000 employees, and they're saying this is unsustainable. So they are preparing mass layoffs. They're preparing mass firings of people in the public sector, which will impact public services. At the same time, Carney's saying he's not going to cut healthcare and education. I'm not sure how that will be possible, and I think anyone who trusts him, I think you'd have to be a pretty big fool to be trusting that that would be the case. Um, but yeah, that's it. There's increased military spending, and this is inevitably going to mean cuts to social services, attacks on the labor movement, et cetera, et cetera. I don't know if you have anything to add to
Oh,
that.
that's exactly it. And I mean, I think this is an important reason why we have to cover these issues because we can't just rely on what the government says to know what the government is going to do. But when you take all these facts and you accumulate
Yeah.
them together, then you can look at the trend in the situation pretty clearly.
Yeah, exactly. So, what is on the horizon? We're revolutionary communists. Like the Communist Manifesto opens with the lines: "The history of all hitherto existing society is the history of class struggles," and that is a fundamental truth. It isn't always out in the open, although we have seen a number of key strikes in the last year. You've seen the postal workers conflict, which is still ongoing. It's not resolved. They're basically looking to privatize and piece up Canada Post. You had the rail workers strike, which was broken by the government, or not strike, actually, they were locked out. It was complicated. They were locked out, and then one of them kind of gave strike notice. But they had their right to strike taken away by the government. You had a number of key conflicts, but largely it's been Canada's not had the same level of, I guess you could say, political discontent, strike movements, big mass movements that you've had in other countries, like in Europe, for example, or even in the United States in terms of political instability, because the crisis has been a bit deeper there. I think the Trudeau government kind of represented this government that was trying to please everyone, and they ended up pleasing no one. But now Carney is quite clearly picking a side. He's picking the side of the big CEOs, the big bourgeoisie. He's doing their bidding, and yeah, I hope we've demonstrated that. You can just see it by quoting them, and yeah, the result of this is going to be quite clear. I think it'll be mass class anger, and we are on the verge, I think, of a big social explosions in Canada. I don't know. You look like you had something to say.
No, I had something. I want to go back a bit, and
Yeah,
I
sure.
actually wanted to talk more about the question of militarism and kind of connect it to what we've been discussing
Mm-hmm.
because I think you can kind of see the logic here. But militarism also connects back to what we began this discussion with, Bill C-5 actually. because this increase of military spending, this creation of new military infrastructure,
Yeah.
what that's going to require is a whole bunch of critical minerals actually.
Yeah.
And the United States in particular has been primarily reliant on China for these critical minerals. They're looking for new markets. And you look at Canada, and actually Canada has a bunch of the resources that all the different powers need
Mm-hmm.
to improve and bolster their military. And in fact, there's this very interesting report from RBC from Shaz Merwat. He's their energy policy lead. There's a quote in here that I think spells it out pretty explicitly. That he says, for Canada, the race to develop and process these minerals is about much more than the mining sector. It underscores a new security paradigm to protect and enhance our economic and national interests in an evolving world order. And also, Tim Hodgson, he's the Energy and Natural Resources Minister. He said that at the recent G7 meeting, all of the countries came up to him saying that they're interested in buying, Canadian critical minerals. And I don't want to get too into detail about this because I think we need to revisit the question here,
Yeah.
in some more detail. But it's worth noting just how important these minerals are for, military production. Just for example, an artillery tank requires 20 different types of critical minerals to build across navigation, communications, different combat systems, and also F-35 jets require almost 1,000 pounds of rare earth elements. So, in the context of this increase towards militarization, there's also going to be there's this hunt for new markets and this hunt for new resources. Canada is caught in the middle of this, and it has all of this wealth in the land that the capitalists just want to plunder now. They also need these minerals to fuel its own drive towards military production. Right, Canada will need these minerals for new batteries and new chips and new stuff like this, right? But this here kind of shows like the logic in the situation because they need to strip back every gain that was made in the past. They need to strip back any obstacle in the way of profit. But when you think about where these mines are going to be set up in, it's going to be set up. It goes back to what we're discussing with the indigenous struggle.
Yeah.
A lot of this is going to be built on indigenous land,
Yeah.
and a lot of this will have to be plowed through without the consent or permission of people living on these territories, right? And inevitably, this actually latent in this is the possibility of new blockades and a new struggle emerging around this question, right? In fact, after Bill C-5 was announced, you had this protest and this press conference in Parliament Hill where you had different Indigenous leaders who were referring back to Idle No More, saying that we want to stage a new Idle No More. And Idle No More was sparked off in 2012 in response to a very similar bill that was proposed by Stephen Harper, right? And that was a big mass movement across the country where people set up blockades and, all around the country, blockades on railroads and roads and streets. So this kind of shows the logic in the situation, right? The more that the government pushes and pushes and pushes for the sake of the profits of the capitalists, the more they inevitably risk sparking off new social movements.
Yeah, exactly. And there's even you wrote an article about this. It's on our website, marxist.ca, about how Carney's angering indigenous groups. And there was even immediate reference to Idle No More. People saying you're going to have another Idle No More. And you even saw, because, Mark Carney passed this bill, C-5, at the federal level, but in various provinces, you're having similar bills being passed. It's all connected. So probably the most important one is this, what's it called? Ring of Fire bill that Doug Ford has passed.
It's actually Bill 5. So it's
It's
almost
Bill
even
5.
the
Okay,
exact
well,
same
they
name,
use the
right?
same name. Why overcomplicate things? And he kind of said the quiet part out loud from his class point of view, where he said, "What did he say about Indigenous groups?" You see, because he got mad when they opposed it.
Oh yeah, he said that indigenous people come to the government hand in hand asking for money. Meanwhile, they're sitting on all the minerals that the world's want, and he said, "No, we're not going to have that anymore." And the thing is that he apologized for this immediately, like
Yeah,
almost the day after.
that's what he means, though.
It's what he means. It's how he feels, and it's how
Yeah.
the capitalists in this country really feel.
Yeah, and so Carney is a lot more careful with his words. He's probably never going to say that, but the ruling class feels that, and it's Indigenous people are 5% of the population. I think the bourgeoisie are kind of like, what? They can't just hold us hostage, and they're sitting on all the resources. So they're faced with a bit of a conundrum. They have to get at those resources, and it is a question of world imperialism is imperative for them to get at those resources. They need to lessen the dependence that they have on China for these critical raw minerals that are used for the production of military equipment. So that is the big context in which a lot of this stuff is happening. I do think is the best way I could describe it is, they need to find a way that Canada can be a part of this the most powerful military alliance that has ever existed, and to be an economic partner with America, principally America, but also Europe, these big Western imperialist powers. And that is to be the quarry, to be the big quarry. And they're going to have to sacrifice Indigenous rights, the environment, basically. And yeah, if there's labor opposition to any of these plans, they're going to have to crush that. So yeah, really, this is kind of the big picture of why this is all happening. And this is also why you need a Marxist analysis. You need a Marxist analysis of this. Otherwise, I think people don't understand why this is happening. All of these things are connected together, right? And it's all connected to the needs of Western imperialism, the dead end that Canadian capitalism finds itself in, right? And this is why, at the end of the day, all of the nice words said about reconciliation, all of the vapid statements about the environment that the Liberals and other people, a lot of people say, ultimately, at the end of the day, when faced up to the economic reality of what the imperialists and the capitalists need, will come out to a big zero, and they won't matter. So that's why we have to oppose this. Not just oppose it. It's good that we oppose all of Carney's plans. We don't trust him, but oppose it on the correct basis. We got to oppose it we oppose capitalism. We oppose imperialism, because this is ultimately the root of this. You wanted to chime in here?
Yeah, I just want to add, this is also why we as communists don't support one capitalist party over another in elections like these. Because you go back to the last election, we've talked about this question of lesser evilism in some depth on the podcast, but I think it deserves to be revisited in this context because you had this layer of the left who argued that we needed to support Mark Carney, no matter how bad he was. We needed to support him against Pierre Poilievre, because if Pierre Poilievre becomes prime minister, what is he going to do? He's going to attack immigrants.
He's going to increase military spending.
He's going to attack Indigenous rights. He's going to destroy environmental regulations. He's going to do all this stuff that he's going to, strip away democratic rights. They said he was going to do all this stuff that Mark Carney is now in government doing. A lot of these are things that Poilievre would have almost done to the letter, you know? And I think there's a point here about how, really, you do have ideological differences in the ruling class, and they do play a role. However, they are primarily motivated by the basic class interests of the capitalists and the real objective needs of the capitalist system in general. And I remember there was this one of his books, Trotsky makes this analogy where he talks about how you can have two lumps of steel that have their own features, but if they're under a hammer that's hot enough and heavy enough, then they're both going to flatten out into identical looking sheet metal. I think that's the policy with any capitalist ministers. The fact that if the crisis of capitalism is so bad as it is in Canada, then no matter who's in power, if they're running on the basis of capitalism, they're going to have to do fundamentally the same things.
Yeah, exactly. I've heard people on the left too say that, well, Carney might not be good, but Poilievre would be worse. And they mentioned things like, oh, Poilievre, he might be pandering to the trade unions, because he did in the last election. He actually won. I think he won. He had the most votes from trade unionists out of any party. But that's all false. It's kind of like Donald Trump. It's fake. He doesn't mean it. No. Right? And he's just going to, if he gets in, he's going to attack the unions, which I agree with. If Poilievre got in, he would attack the unions. But that's not a justification for voting for Mark Carney. And he hasn't done it yet. And he might be a bit tentative with it. They would prefer if they could mollify resistance to what they're doing, if they get the leaders of the trade unions to somehow justify it. And that's actually usually what they've done. They get the bureaucracy of the trade unions, the leaders of the trade unions, who don't, generally speaking, don't have a fighting bone in them. They get them to kind of temper the expectations of their members and make so there's not any labor conflict. Of course, they can't always guarantee that because they have to represent the members, and the members are angry. They want to fight. They want to fight. And so inevitably, watch, Mark Carney will have to do something about the coming storm of class conflict. And you want to know what he's going to do? Well, doing the bidding of the bosses. The Business Council of Canada, which I mentioned, represents the top 170 companies in the country, just last year produced a report where they said the government must do something about all these labor disruptions. They principally were talking about the railways strikes, but they mentioned over 60 labor disruptions. And they said this is going to run counter to Canada basically opening up to business, opening up its critical minerals, opening up its mining to this whole plan that we've discussed here. And they said the government must step in. They mentioned it was good that what the government did with the railway workers, which basically there was 1 day of work lost, and then they took away their right to strike. But they said that wasn't good enough because there was still 1 day lost, and it takes a few days to get the railways up and running, so it dislocated the economy a little bit. And so basically, from their point of view, they don't want the right to strike. That's essentially what they're saying. They don't want the right to strike, and they said this. They said there needs to be a serious national conversation about improving the legal tools the federal government has available to prevent or rapidly end a labor disruption that is threatening Canada's national interest. Now, Mark Carney hasn't said that yet. But if you go back through the record, he's basically done everything that they've asked so far, except for this. So I think the trade unions are going to find themselves in the crosshair, which is also why we shouldn't separate these issues. We shouldn't say, Bill C-5, oh, that's not about labor. I know that some trade unions do this. I bet you some trade unions support the law. They probably support Doug Ford's Ring of Fire law because they think jobs, right? Watch. Bill C-5 is not just about environmental regulation and Indigenous people. It's connected to this entire reactionary program from this government that has to make Canada, the Canadian market, competitive again. In order to make it competitive again, they have to cut regulations. They have to run roughshod over Indigenous rights. And yes, they're going to have to settle scores with Canadian labor movement. They're going to have to attack benefits, attack wages, attack pensions, etc., etc. And that will lead to lowering living conditions for everyone. So it is in the best interest of the entire labor movement, of the entire working class, to fight against every damn reactionary law that this government is putting forward, including Bill C-5, Bill C-2, the increased military spending, and the austerity measures that are coming, and the inevitable attacks on the trade union movement. And this must be resisted tooth and nail by everybody, I think. So, and if you voted for Mark Carney, we get some comments on our stuff that when we criticize Mark Carney where they're like, no, he's great. He's better than Poilievre. I'm like, wake up. Wake up. You made a mistake. It's fine. We all make mistakes.
We'll forgive you.
Yeah, we'll forgive you maybe, we need to, but yeah, whatever, we need to fight against this. So I'm not sure you have any, I think we've sort of run the course of this question. I don't know if you have anything to add that we've missed here.
I'll just do a final remark.
Yeah.
I think that's partially why the response from Indigenous groups towards Bill C-5 is so significant. Like, you do have the possibility of a struggle opening up on this question. You have the possibility of, big protests against the bill. You have the possibility of new blockades against, land encroachment and these kind of, unwanted, like, developments,
Yeah.
And in the events where this happens, I think the labor movement needs to support these struggles of the Indigenous movement, not just for abstract moral reasons, but because this provides a great opportunity to strike a blow against a common enemy.
Yeah.
If we weaken the government on this question and we fight back this initial assault, that's going to weaken the government politically down the line, and it's going to make it harder for them to unleash any bigger provocations against the Indigenous movement or against the labor movement. it's going to be a blow to our common enemy.
Yeah, I think that sums up the approach quite well. I mean, we all, workers of the world unite. I think we need to focus, and an injury to one is an injury to all. So yeah, if this government is defeated on this, they'll be weak in general, and they'll be less likely to attack the labor movement because they've been defeated on one issue. So yes, that is something that the Revolutionary Communist Party is arguing for, that we're going to argue for in the movement. Mark Carney is not our savior. Mark Carney is a class enemy. Mark Carney is ramming through this regressive program, and there will be more, and it is in the best interest of all of us, the labor movement, all of us, every working class person, to fight against this and to fight for, yes, unity of the indigenous struggle and the working class and the wider working class struggle against the common enemy of the Canadian ruling class that's violating Indigenous land, that's destroying the environment, and that's making all of our lives worse. You see that in every major city. Unaffordable to live. Wages have largely stagnated. Real wages have largely stagnated. Benefits have been cut down, have been whittled away, right? This is not our government. This is a government of the capitalist class, and we need to fight against it. So yes, this is Mark Carney doing the boss's bidding. I hope you liked the podcast this week. This paper just came out. It's our latest issue. So if you want to read more on this, we have articles on all of these topics in the paper. I recommend you go to marxist.ca/subscribe to become a subscriber to the paper. Share it with your friends. We need to build an independent working class media that provides a communist solution, Marxist analysis to all these issues, and that's what the RCP does here in Canada. So yeah, if you like the podcast, like I said, become a subscriber, but more importantly, contact us, get involved in the revolutionary struggle, get involved in the struggle against Mark Carney, and not just against Mark Carney, against the capitalist class as a whole, in the fight for socialist revolution.